Good morning and welcome back to Bible study. So glad that you are here with us as we continue through this book of Ephesians, as we talk each and every day about this topic of unity. Today we find ourselves in Ephesians chapter 3, and I'm glad that you are here along with us. Now, if you are new or if you've never done so, I want to encourage you to head over to christtable.today and find out a little bit more about the ministry behind this Bible study. Would love to have you be a part of what we're doing and where we're going. Would love to have you just simply check us out. You can find us over at www.christtable.today. You can sign up for the email list there. In fact, I'm sending out an email later today. So now is a great time. You'll find out all of the things that are coming up and that are going on behind the scenes at Christ Table. And also would encourage you to donate. If you are a regular here at Bible study, this only happens because of the financial generosity of those who partner with us. And we need you. We need more people to be a part of what we're doing here in order for us to continue to do this. Either way, though, I'm glad that you're joining us each and every day as we walk through the book of Ephesians. If you'd love to download the entire reading plan, I'd love to give you a PDF that outlines everything over the next few weeks. And you can access that by going to go.christtable.today/unity. Now, a couple of other things that I want to make sure that you are aware of. We also have a in-person Zoom live together book study each and every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. We're working through a great book. It's called From Tablet to Table by author Leonard Sweet, and you can be a part of that. I know tomorrow night at 9 p.m. we're discussing chapter 2, and maybe you're behind or maybe you've never heard of the book and you're new. Either way, you can still be a part of this. The book is super short, super simple read, and you really don't have to read all of the previous material. Every chapter is kind of a small book in and of itself. And so feel free to just download From Tablet to Table and then read chapter 2 and join us tomorrow night at the Zoom link that's right there, go.christtable.today/discuss, and be a part of the journey. In fact, I have finally confirmed the date that Lynn Sweet is going to be on one of those calls with us, taking our questions and talking to us. And if you'd like more information about that and when that's going to happen, well, sign up for the email list right there. Go christtable.today. We have also some in-person gatherings that are on the books, and one of them is this coming Sunday down here in South Florida in Jupiter. We'd love to have you be a part of that. We're planning a little cookout, safely social distanced, and then maybe head over to the beach afterwards. And then we're going to be in Ohio, in Cleveland, in Willoughby on April 22nd, the following Sunday. And same routine, though we probably won't go to the beach in Ohio. Lake Erie it's quite cold, even this time of year, at least for me. Now, the thing is, you also need to make sure that you're on the email list because these are kind of in flux with everything going on with COVID right now. We're kind of looking at the numbers and we're talking to a lot of our team leaders in the ministry and trying to figure out exactly what we want to do. If we can do it safely, we'll proceed forward with these. And if we have any concerns, then, well, we're an online ministry anyway, mostly, so we know what to do. But without any further delay, why don't we dig in? One of the things that I have noticed over the years is that people who value something tend to do a much better job of taking care of it. I noticed this actually in my home. The things that my dad valued, he spent a lot of time taking care of. His gun collection was one of those things. And I can remember my dad always cleaning his guns in order to make sure that they were in proper working order for when he would go target practicing or shooting. Another thing that was very important to my dad was his vehicles. He was always washing his cars, and oftentimes my high school friends and college friends would bring their cars over, and just they knew on a Saturday that if their car was parked in our driveway that my dad was probably going to wash it because he'd be washing his car, so they'd get a free car wash. When we had a boat and a house, Dad also took very good care of those things. But one of the things that I noticed was a lot of my friends' families didn't take care of their things, their firearms or their cars or houses or if they had a boat They didn't take care of those things in the same way that my dad did. Now, that's not to say that they didn't take care of anything in their life. What I came to realize was they spent that time and energy and money and resources on other things. For some of them, it was their profession or their career. For others, it was family. Maybe they dedicated more time or energy to family vacations or to being with their kids or to ball practices and investing in lessons and training. But I think all of us, it could be said, value something, maybe multiple things. And whenever we value something, we invest in it. And the things that we don't value, we tend not to invest in. Well, the value that we place on something will determine what we are willing to endure for it. We will put up with a lot if we place value on something. A marriage where the partners value each other will be able to endure many storms because of it. But if there is a breakdown in love, affection, communication, the relationship, then whenever things hit trouble, if there's little value that's placed on the other person, then many times those marriages fall apart and aren't willing or able to endure difficulties. Well, when we come to the Bible and the good news of Jesus Christ, the same principle applies. The value that we place on the gospel, the value that we place on the good news, will determine how much we're willing to endure for it, will determine how much it impacts our lives. Someone who values their faith, values Jesus, values the good news that he brings to them and to the world, will ultimately allow it to have a huge transformational impact on their lives, versus someone else who places less value on their faith, the gospel. Maybe their things that they value, their list is boats and houses and vacations and families. And so maybe further down the list is their faith. They're probably not going to experience as much transformation, as much life change as the other person, because they're not investing as much in it. And they may not be able to endure as much in their faith because they haven't put as much value into it. So as we come into Ephesians chapter 3, this is essentially what Paul has been speaking of, is the value of the gospel, the good news of Jesus, and how it is able to transform, and how the value that we place upon it determines many times our personal outcomes each and every day. So Ephesians chapter 3, verse 1, Paul writes, "When I think of all of this, I, Paul, a prisoner of Christ Jesus, for the benefit of you Gentiles." And then he pauses here after just having reminded them who he is and where he is in prison and why he's there, because he was preaching to the Gentiles. And so the Jewish people were not a fan of that. They wanted to keep God to themselves and not allow all people in. And so Paul, now having said who he was, where he is, and why he's there, kind of breathes for a moment in thinking about all of that, and then begins in verse 2 on a bit of a rabbit trail, assuming, by the way, that God gave me the special responsibility of extending his grace to you Gentiles. Paul says, I want you to remember and not forget that the reason why I'm in prison is because God gave me this job. Not of being a traveling evangelist, but God gave me this job of extending what had been extended to the Jews, also to you, to the rest of the world, so that only one ethnic group would not be the keepers of it, the gatekeepers of it, but as we spoke of yesterday, that wall of hostility would be torn down. As I briefly wrote earlier, Paul says, God himself revealed his mysterious plan to me. Paul says this is directly from God. It's not what I want. It's not what I wanted to be doing, but this is from God. And because of that, it has value to me that I obey, and it has value to you that you listen and internalize it. Verse 4. As you read what I have written, you will understand my insight into this plan regarding Christ. God did not reveal it to previous generations. Paul's saying it was always the plan. God just didn't make it fully clear. It was still in shadows until the right time. And now is the right time, because Paul writes in verse 5, but now, by his Spirit, he's revealed it to his holy apostles and to prophets. God has shown his leaders that this is the plan and that this is the time. And now, Paul says, it's my responsibility to spread that good news. And it's valuable news. And this is God's plan. Paul writes, verse 6, both Gentiles and Jews who believe the good news share equally in the riches inherited by God's kingdom. No one is able to keep it to themselves. Both Gentiles and Jews who believe the good news share equally in the riches now inherited by God's children. Both are part of the same body, Paul writes, and both enjoy the promise of blessings because they belong to Christ Jesus. There is no favoritism to the brothers and sisters in the family anymore. Though once the oldest son, the Jewish nation, was perceived as being the favored one and the most blessed, now the promise to Abraham that all people will become a part of God's family has now come true. Both are now a part of the same body, the body of Jesus Christ, the family of God, and both enjoy the promise of blessings because they belong to Christ Jesus. And so what Paul is essentially outlining here for us is a very clear statement that God's will is that we would work together and be together, all people. Now, fast forward 2,000 years from when Paul wrote this, and there isn't much friction between Jews and Gentiles. Gentiles are more than willing to allow Jewish people into the faith, and Jewish believers, Jewish followers of Yeshua, of Jesus, who see him as the Messiah, are more than willing to allow access to Yeshua, to the Messiah, to Gentiles. And so this isn't necessarily the friction of our day. In fact, the Christian faith, which, as Paul's writing to the church in Ephesus, which was then essentially a movement within the Jewish faith, predominantly with Gentiles beginning to come on board, now the tables have been turned, where now it's predominantly Gentile, and there are very few Jewish people who are a part of this faith that Paul says we should work together and be together. And there's not much friction there. But the friction comes now in other ways and in other places where we set boundaries or walls of hostility up, not between Jews and Gentiles, but we set walls of hostility up between other believers based on their politics, based on their economic class, based on their race or ethnicity, based on social or cultural issues, whether or not they affirm multiple sexual identities or whether they don't, whether they affirm lifestyles that we agree with or whether they don't, whether they are in agreement with us on the finer points of doctrine, be it Calvinism or Arminianism. We still set up walls of hostility today, but perhaps not so much between Jew and Gentile. And so I think Paul's words are still appropriate, but through the lenses of today. God's will is that we would still yet today tear down those walls of hostility that we build up between other followers of Jesus, even though they are different or believe differently than we do, that we would still work together and be together with people who are not of our race or ethnicity, that we would still work together and be together with people who are not of our same political persuasions, that we would still work together and be together with people whom are still following the way, even if it is not our way. Thanks be to God Thanks be to God that we are forced to be together and work together rather than be in isolation. Well, it's been good to be with you today, and looking forward to being back with you tomorrow. Again, all of this is brought to you thanks to ChristTable.today. Would love to have you join us on the journey of what God is doing here. Until tomorrow.